$3.2 million contract is on the City Council agenda tomorrow. It's for downtown parking renovations. 5 contractors bid on the project and the city accepted the lowest bid. The proposed street renovations are under I-480 between the intersections of 19th and Chicago to 15th and Cass. 350 more spots are expected down there, and the project should take about 5 months. When finished, most of the spots will be rented out by the month, which costs about $48 a month.
If you think of the towers that are being built and the other developments happening, there's no way we can park all those construction employees in the downtown as it is now. We can accommodate some of them, but we're going to have some off-site areas for them to park at.
Now, Smith told us in the future these resurfaced lots would be used for major events in the areas like the College World Series.